Shalom. So today we're going to look at the beginning of a year. So we're going to get into a few aspects of it. So we're going to deal with the demarcation of a new year. What do we use to say a new year has begun? Because a lot of us are under the impression that the new year is determined by the vegetations of the land. But it is not determined by what is below, but by what happens above, right? And we're going to get into all the details regarding the vegetations or the elements of the heaven, right? Also, we're going to look at what a new year entails, because for some people, it can start whatever day of the week, whichever. It can start during the night, and also if you can take days from the previous year and put with the new year, right? So we're gonna sever things from the cultures of the other society as opposed to the ancient culture of the scriptures or the ancient culture of the Hebrews, right? So we're going to look into those details. We're going to also look at what does it mean when we use the term end of the year. What are we actually talking about? What is it that come to an end? Is it the vegetations of the earth? Or is it the revolution of the elements above? Right? Also, we're going to deal with the beginning of a year. What is beginning? The beginning of the vegetations in the earth? Or is it the beginning of the revolution of the elements above? Right? So we're going to start with the demarcation of a new year. We're going to go to the book of Genesis, chapter 1 and verse 14. It says, "And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night." So the very lights are going to make a separation between day and night. So if the Most High separates something, we have to ask, who is it that is joining them together? Who is joining what the Most High already parted asunder? Because a lot of people like to say 24-hour days. Yes, if you adapt to this culture, you can have that theory. But in this culture, it does not exist. You will never find a place in the Bible that speaks of a 24-hour day. You'll never find a passage that talks about a day and it is referring to a period of 24 hours. It can speak about a long period of time. For example, it says, "And the days of Noah were, and the days of Adam were." And it's talking about a long period of time, like a season. But you'll never find a day in the context of 24 hours. So again, if the Most High separates it, do not join it together. So even when you're talking, always make that distinction. Otherwise, you will go back to what you're familiar with. So if you're speaking about day, speak about day. If you're speaking about night, speak about night. But do not merge them together, because it does not exist. And it's the same thing that we do with this calendar. You'll take some days of the previous year and some days of this year, and you merge them together and you say that's 1 week. How do you take a few days from the previous year? That is already gone. You have to deal with what is present, right? So that was important. It says, to divide the day from the night, let them be for signs. These are lights, so it has to be visible. And the way I said that is because a lot of people, they use particular phase of the moon that they can't even see. And the night before that, you still can't see it because sometimes the moon goes out for 3 nights, right? So if this is the night that you're using, but the previous night you couldn't see any sign, then what principles are you going by? You're just gonna hope that, okay, this is the new moon, or this might be the new moon. And it's the same for the people that use the little sliver when the light is just resurrecting. What do you use before? This is why sometimes you're confused. You're wondering, oh, is the moon out yet? Is it coming out tonight? Or no, I haven't seen it. No, you're asking everybody else if they had seen it. Because you're clueless. What is the sign that you're looking for to say, okay, tomorrow we should rest? Okay, tomorrow we cannot buy and sell. What is the sign? Right? It says, let them be for signs and for seasons. Now, season is very important because a lot of people do not break down the details of this. So they can just tell you, okay, one season begin here, one ends here, and that's it. But how much do they get into the details? How many days are in a season? Is it fixed or is it always changing? Right? It says, and for days and years. And that's the part that we want. Years. So when you're dealing with years, guess what? You're also dealing with the beginning of a year. No. The question is, for those who believe that the new year is determined by vegetations, now my question is, and this question is what you should ask yourself. It's for you to question what you hold to be true. Or if it is that you look up to other spiritual leaders, your congregation, or whoever it is, ask them to provide you with a passage in the Bible that says the beginning of a year is determined by the vegetations of the earth. What would you do if you were living in desert areas? What would you look for? What vegetations would you look for if you're living in places where it's just a dry ground, nothing there? Right? So we have to ask these questions, not to question others, but to question what we hold to be true. There's not a passage in the Bible. No. What happened is that a lot of us, we go to the Strongs or the definition of words, but that was not what the Most High said. He said precept upon precept, line upon line. So topic upon topic, right? Context upon context. No, they will go to the book of Exodus or other scriptures that it talks about Abib or Nisan, right? Then they look for the definition. Abib, the ear of corn, right? No, does that determine when the year begin? The moment the year begin? The day the year begin? It just means that it is young. All these different cultures, that was what they were doing. They go by their vegetation so they can do what? Praise their God of vegetations. We don't do that. We just know that, okay, this is why we count the first month, the second month, the third month, all the way back to 12 months. Representation of the 12 tribes and so forth, right? It's the same. These things are symbolic. So once you reach to the 12th month, you know that the next new moon is going to be the beginning of the cycle, right? So you cannot say, it's not right to say the beginning of the year depends on vegetation. Then what do you use for the end of the year, right? And also, if you say this day is if you're going by the vegetation and this day is the first day of your year, then what does the day before look like in terms of vegetation? Does it just miraculously change from everything being dead to just springing? No. There is no scripture that points to that. And this is what happens when you rely on the Strongs for your understanding. The ear of corn, the vegetations do not determine the new year. Genesis 1 verse 14 does. When you're dealing with the movement of lights, how does it work? Because you're dealing with an entire revolution, right? Works like this. So if you have the starting point here, which is, okay, let's see. If it starts here, the first month, then here would be the 12th, for example. So once it goes around like this, 6, and then another 6 comes back here, 12. So this is the end and the beginning of the revolution. So first, what's going to happen is that the sun will be leaving from the deep south. So here would be like 0 degrees east. And that's for this, right? The sun only reaches this point one time of the year. And this you refer to as spring equinox. Some people believe you have equal day and equal night. That's not what the equinox is about. And also, if you're using the Roman calendar, they will tell you that the equinox is March 20 or 21st, somewhere there, right? Now the question is, what I want you to do is, for your research, not researching through books, but through nature, go outside and these days and record the first hour of the day to the end and the first hour of the night to the end, and see if you get an equal day and equal night. Because equinox has nothing to do with a date of the month. Equinox is not a date in time. It is a location in the sky. It is when the sun changes its path from deep south. Here you'd have north, and here you'd have south. The sun is crossing its path from deeper south, heading back towards 0 degrees east. And that's the only time of the year the sun rises 0 degrees east. It's always going to be headed from east to the north and to the south. It does half of the time here and half of the time here. That's it. So what happens now to, what do you use to mark the beginning of the year? The sun is going to cross from the south going back towards the east. Now, the new moon that follows this is the beginning of the year. And we're going to go to the book of Exodus. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 12 and verse 2. It says, "This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." So this is why we use solar, lunar, because the sun alone is not enough to tell you time in general. The moon and the stars alone are not enough to tell you accurate time. So if you're going by a lunar calendar, you will be off at least by a few hours. If you're going by a solar calendar, you will be off, because you need the sun to declare the day and the moon and the stars to deal with the night. And that is what it says. Motherfucker, let's read it in. Let's go to the book of Genesis chapter 1 verse 16. It says, okay, start at 15. It says, "And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth." And this is also telling you that the earth is not moving, because if the earth is moving, then there will be a problem with the light. It is the light that is moving because it is not big enough to cover all the earth. So when it says let there be light, guess what? The entire earth did not have day. It's just a portion. And that's over in the east. And this is why you see like the islands of the seas, like Japan, Taiwan, those places, they first get daylight, then come over to China and Russia, those places, Turkey, then it comes all the way over. When it crosses, when it's leaving Africa, this is where we in the West start to have our day. They're having their first night. We are having our first day. So in Asia, in the East, they have their first day and they're in their first night. We are entering our first day while they're in when they're in their first night. So they're always 12 hours ahead of us. Why? What happens with that 12-hour difference? This is it. Here you have Africa. Here you have Europe. And here you have Asia. Right? Over here we have what's called the West. USA, Canada, USA, Mexico, Caribbean, South America, right? When the sun leaves from here to go back around here, it takes a period of 12 hours. So this is 12 hours of darkness. And this is the change, or this is what it means when it says to divide the light from the dark. So this is a whole 12 hours, and this is why you'll see the least or the most you can be apart is 12 hours. So if you're, say you're sharing the same Sabbath with a person in China or Japan, they will at least be 12 hours ahead of you. So when they're in the night part of the Sabbath, that's when you're just going to begin your day part of the Sabbath in the West. 12 hours difference, because this is the, what's it called? The Pacific. Nothing much goes on there. This is why even planes don't fly here. Doesn't matter where you're leaving from. As close as it be, you don't fly this way. This is 12 hours. Right? So these are things that we need to understand. It's necessary, because we're dealing with what? The Most High. Right? So this is the distance. So everything goes on here. Right? Now, how is it with crossing, when the sun is crossing here, the Atlantic? How is the time difference? It's only like 6 hours. So for example, people in Africa, certain parts of Africa, depending on the time of the year, right? We don't change our hours. In the Caribbean, we don't change our hours because the sun travels through our part. The sun travels in this region here. I mean, this should be the Caribbean, right? The sun travels there, so we see the sun moving like this over our heads. If you're living in the Arctic region or so forth, guess what? You will just see the sun moving over the horizon, over the mountains like this. That's all you see. We don't have the same experience. So it is not right for people living in these regions to dictate to us how the Most High functions. It's just like a rich man determining how a poor man should live. Ask Bill Gates how much is it for a box milk. Ask him how much is it for 6 eggs. Ask him how much is it for bread. But yet these people are telling us, poor people, how to live, how to survive. It cannot be functional because our realities are not the same. Have you seen the movie Good Deeds? with the rich man, Tyler Perry, and the woman with the child, they're two different realities. Yes, they coexist, they're in the same place, but two different realities. And it was only one way for Tyler Perry to understand the reality from the woman's standpoint. He had to come down to her level, right? So we cannot have these people up here telling us when our year begins and when it ends. They do not set their timing to worship the Most High. Their timing is for political businesses, for economics. The devil controls the world through its commerce. And this is why you have the problem in the Samoa Island, because half of it is towards America and the other half is towards the east, right? The sun rises and sets in the same place at the same time, yet over on this side, their timing is with the west, and the other side, their timing is with the east. So they'll have two different dates. For example, the Samoa Island, two places side by side, but this one will be having, say, March 21st, right? And this one is having March 20. That has nothing to do with the heavens. It is about political businesses. When it was given over to the West, they had to change their time for trading purposes. Had nothing to do with the elements. And that's the same thing that they're doing here, controlling us with the same things, because we work for their businesses. So we have to fit in with what they're doing. No, we don't have to fit in. We don't have to bend the knees to Baal. We don't have to bend the knees to Nebuchadnezzar. We can work with it, but we do not have to give over our minds to it as and accept it as our reality. This is our reality, the law of the Most High. This is our home, not those physical lands that you are dwelling in. This is your home. The law of the Most High is our home, right? This is where we give our minds and spirit to, not to this society, not to political greed, right? So I hope this is clear enough for us to understand that the new year begins with the movement of lights, the revolution, not the vegetation. That's not enough to determine that. You cannot be looking up the word Abib and says it means the tender or the ear of corn or the green ears and say, okay, yes, that is spring. There's no scripture that tells you to use the vegetation.